Hello and welcome, everyone. Happy Monday. Welcome to today's webinar, Wellbeing and Well-Becoming Through the Arts, Centering Culture and Community in Youth Arts Programs. And thank you so much to everyone for introducing yourselves in the chat. Who are we? We are the Forum for Youth Investment. And here at the Forum, we envision a world in which all young people reach their fullest potential in education, in work, and in life. And how do we do that? We do that in three core areas: program quality, systems change, and policy. At the heart of all of this is our incredible, amazing research and evaluation team whose work helps us understand what truly makes a difference in the lives of young people. And today's webinar really builds upon that foundation. We're going to be focusing on how arts can foster well-being and a sense of mattering for youth of color. And we are so happy to have you here with us. And a quick overview of today's webinar here. This webinar will feature a very recent report from the Forum and the University of Pittsburgh School of Education, Well-Being and Well-Becoming Through the Arts, a picture of mattering for youth of color. This report was commissioned by the Wallace Foundation and released in February 2025. A link to that report can be found right there in our chat. We're going to drop a link so that you can access that report. Now, during the first half of today's session, we're going to dive into the report's key findings. Then we're going to move into a panel discussion with practitioners from youth art programs featured in the study. And I will say I'm super excited to be here and a part of this because I had the incredible opportunity to be a part of doing some of the focus groups for this. So I am so thrilled to hear from some of these practitioners and really dive into the reports for this finding. So lastly, we're going to wrap up with the Q&A. Please feel free to drop any questions that you have in our chats, or you can use that Q&A feature that we have. Speaking about our features here on this webinar, we want you to use the chat. So some of you have already started to do that, but if you haven't, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Give us your name, your pronouns if you feel comfortable, your organization you're here representing, and location. Where are you zooming in from today? This chat is going to stay open for conversation and questions throughout today's webinar. But again, you can always use our Q&A feature for any questions that you want to pose to our panelists. I also want to mention that this webinar is being recorded and that the recording will be able to be shared within the coming days. Now, without further ado, I am really excited to welcome researchers Tom Akiva and Asohe Osai from University of Pittsburgh, as well as Tiffany Walker from the Forum, who will give us an overview of the study and the findings. Welcome, everyone.
Hello, hello. Thank you so much, Siobhan, for that handoff. It's great to see you again after a couple of years. You've been a long time planning this study, and to see you at the early part and see you at the end, now it's a very special moment. I'm going to share my screen. I'm hoping you all will be able to see. All right, are we good? Okay. All right, so we're going to just jump right in. We have 15 minutes to get through the research part, and then we're excited to have the folks from the programs here to talk in the panel. So that's the really exciting part. So we'll get through the meat first in terms of the study before we get to that part. But before we jump into it, I want to really give some acknowledgments. This was a major undertaking, and a lot of folks had a role in what we did. And so Tom and Tiffany and I get to present today, but so many folks were a part of this project from the beginning. And so I want to give a big shout out to the Forum for Youth Investment, the Reichert Center, for being a great partner on this project. They are unique in that they have great reach within the communities that do work for youth, but also a breadth of expertise and research And so we're grateful that we had a chance to partner with them and couldn't have picked a better partner for this project. And also Wallace Foundation is a funder for this project, of course, is really important. But most importantly, the 35 programs that were involved in this study. Many of you might be here today on this webinar, and we're glad to be able to share with you the findings from our experience with you in the last couple of years. And so I'm going to jump into the kind of conceptualization of our study that we have developed. And we did a multi-method study that had programs that had 3 specific components. Number 1, these were high quality arts programs. These were not programs that were focused on, just general enrichment or more general youth development programs that use the arts, but rather they were programs that existed to train artists. They were unapologetic in their intention to build skills in an art form, whether visual arts, dance, theater, music, literary arts, or digital media arts. And so these programs, again, were serving youth in these specific art forms. Number 2, these were community-based youth development programs. They existed in the context of a community. They were using nonprofits that were embedded within communities, and they also served neighborhoods and folks who were engaged in that space. So again, they operate with a very specific commitment to community. Thirdly, these programs were culture-centered programs in the sense they were either founded by or led by a person of color, and they predominantly serve youth connected to racial or ethnic identities that were either Black, Asian American, Indigenous, Latinx, or living within the context of the U.S. And so again, based in the U.S., and we had a chance to look at programs serving youth of color in these spaces. So these 3 components, which we identify as culture-centered community-based youth arts programs, were selected for the study. We were able to make connections between what these programs did and well-being, which ultimately led us to well-becoming. And so there are strong linkages to the other studies that they're commissioned by Wallace right now. If you check out Wallace's website, they have new reports that are coming out, and you can check them out on social media as well to keep abreast of what they're looking at around youth arts for different communities. I'm going to share a quick quote that came from a program leader in Detroit, and we had a chance to go through a ton of interview data and focus group data, and a lot of really key quotes stood out that you'll see in the report, but I want to highlight this one as a point of conversation. So this individual said that art provides some freedom that perhaps may not be explicit in some other fields. It pushes this aspect of creativity. It's not about measuring up to particular artificial standards. It's about exploration and joy and leaning into creativity. I think that's important because when you think about well-being, you want to feel confident, you want to feel knowledgeable, like you have a purpose or have value. And so as we're thinking about the connection between arts involvement and well-being, I think this quote just captures it beautifully. There's a unique element to the arts that has this element of being alive, of being confident, of having some type of skill that allows you to feel like you're contributing to something that's bigger than who you are yourself. And so I think that's a beautiful part of what we kind of uncovered in this study. And I'm going to pass it on now to my colleague Tom to share more of a few cases of our study.
Thanks, Asohe, and wonderful to see so many friends in the participants list. Thank you all for coming. The sites we visited had all 3 of the features Asohe described, but here are some examples to help communicate what those features looked like. So first, for high quality arts learning, Atlanta Music Project provides instrumental and choral music training and performance opportunities to youth in under-resourced communities. So this is a classical program in the conservatory style. Youth are learning instruments, they're learning to sing in choirs, and high quality arts learning is really at the core. Next, these sites are all community-based youth development programs. So as an example here, we have Words, Beats, and Life in DC, which focuses on DJing, graffiti, emceeing, and breaking. And like all of the programs we visited, they're a youth development program first. They're also strongly community embedded. They have community concerts, festivals, workshops, and partnerships. An example of culture-centered is Motor City Street Dance Academy, which works to enhance the lives of Detroiters through aerosol art, which the other program called graffiti, I think, breaking, DJing, beat making, anime, comic design, and yoga, all through the lens of hip hop. So a little bit about our research. In this mixed methods study, we engaged with 35 youth arts programs across the US. We began with an ecosystem mapping process for each city, which included at least one interview with a community leader who helped us with site selection. We sought strong examples of CCYA. You can see the breakdown of art forms on the right. Most sites offered multiple art forms. Research activities included interviews with program leaders, youth surveys, and teaching artist focus groups. But the heart of the study were these 90-minute in-person cross-age workshops we did, typically with 4 to 6 youth and 2 to 3 teaching artists per site. These were highly interactive workshops, and we used a storytelling method to learn about youth and teaching artist experiences. We took these transcripts and conducted a team-based multi-cycle analysis using Deduce software, which you can read all about in our technical appendix if you like. Passing it back.
All right, thank you, Tom. So I'm going to give you a little taste of what we uncovered in analyzing all of the data from the study in terms of the characteristics that we found were present across the programs in the study. And so we have this kind of question around how do CCYA programs support well-being and well-becoming? And these 7 characteristics emerged and showed up in distinct ways across the programs. Number 1, these programs nurture artistic skill. So they provide the creative communities develop skill and confidence in the arts. That's the core of what the programs are doing. They exist, again, to train artists in most cases and to really provide access to learn the arts. In cases where many of those students may not have arts in their schools or the spaces that they engage in, they are filling a really major need for the students who are interested in the arts. Number 2, the programs will cultivate creative restoration. So they engage youth minds and bodies in creative expression that promote positive emotions. So youth were often able to talk about how they felt good. They may have had a really bad day at school. Maybe mom and dad get on my nerves, but I come to my program and I feel this sense of joy, this sense of peace, a sense of like fulfillment around being able to engage in this enterprise of creating art and being able to do that in a way that feels nourishing to me as an individual. Number 3, these programs all established artful sanctuaries. They were spaces of belonging, spaces where people were able to engage with one another in ways that were restorative and really allowed those relationships that are needed for youth development, as we know, is a major part of that process of becoming adult. They also foster generative connections. And so beyond just the connections within the program, they also allowed youth to understand and connect with other organizations that were in the community, other people who maybe were in different fields, who gave them exposure to different opportunities that maybe they would not have had otherwise. Next, they highlight meaningful pathways. I think this is tied to the last point around like, how do you imagine what you might do, either through the arts or through another field of interest that may be part of what you experienced in the program. They allowed students to be able to connect to pathways that existed within their communities and also within the broader world. There was one program in Tacoma where I remember the students mentioned going to the Capitol and having a chance to talk about and advocate for the arts in that space. And so then students were like, oh, I could go into policy and think about ways that they could actually impact change in their communities. Next, they promoted cultural visibility. So these programs were intentional in acknowledging, affirming, and celebrating the past, present, and future people of color. This is a space where it was a beautiful thing to understand your identity and be able to explore it in ways through the arts. And lastly, the programs all emphasize equity and intentionality. So they were very intentional about serving communities that may not have had access to the arts and were looking to disrupt barriers, whether they be economic or otherwise, that would prevent students from being able to engage thoughtfully in these experiences. And so that gives kind of a sense of what that looked like in terms of these characteristics. I know that we'll have a chance to hear more from our panelists a bit more very soon here. But before we do that, I think my screen went out. I want to go ahead and talk about a very special part of our data collection. We had a lot of data collection methods in this particular study, but we have Tiffany here to talk about what she led, which was our teaching artist focus group. So I'm going to pass it on to Tiffany.
Excellent. Thank you, Asohe.
Mhm.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tiffany Walker, a senior research and evaluation specialist with the Forum's Weichert Center. So like Dr. Osai and Dr. Akiva mentioned, the Forum was a partner in this study, and we participated in several aspects of data collection. One component that we want to highlight today during our conversation with you are the teaching artist focus groups. So these focus groups took place mainly in the fall and winter of 2023. And what we did, we connected with the project leaders or the program leaders, a part of the study, and asked them to help us recruit these teaching artists so we could engage with them in conversation just about the work that they do and also compensate them for their time. So we really were looking to learn from the teaching artist during these conversations. So as a result of that recruitment, we hosted about 13 online sessions. They were about 60 minutes each. And we had 51 full and part-time teaching artists that were able to participate. They were from 18 unique programs, and all 8 cities in the study were represented. So the focus group protocol that we developed, again, it was designed to engage the teaching artists in conversation about their perspectives on program goals and strategies, youth outcomes, and just their overall teaching artist experiences. And so after those interviews were recorded and transcribed, we went through this process of analyzing the data through thematic coding. So analyzing, identifying patterns that we saw. And from that, there were several things that emerged. What I want to share with you today are 3 of those themes that materialized from those discussions. So the first theme that came up was this idea of skill building. So you just heard Dr. Osai make mention of that in the 7 characteristics, but this idea of skill building, the teaching artists really talked about helping young people develop their techniques. So reading music notes, adjusting their bodies when they're doing different dance movements. So they saw that as crucial and critical to the goals of their programs. They also talked about their programs as these platforms for this type of artistic development that could either lead to a future occupation in a particular discipline and or this lasting appreciation for the arts. So one teaching artist told us this, quote, "I want to build in them a knowledge of technique, of process, and a lifelong sort of appreciation that they can go forward with no matter where they end up in their life's journeys." So that's the first one that came from these conversations, skill building. The second theme that came up in those conversations was this notion around critical consciousness. So some of the teaching artists really talked about how they use their programs to discuss social issues with young people, helping them analyze systems and really reflect on power dynamics and using their art to do it. So one teaching artist told us this, quote, "We get to use theater and social change together for young people to have insights towards each other's conditions cross-culturally. It's empowering." So this notion around critical consciousness came through in those conversations. The third and last thing that I'll share from those conversations is centered around the role of the teaching artist. So the teaching artist talked about these different pathways that they have taken to become an artist that teaches young people. So some of them talked about a university education, some talked about apprenticeships. They all had these varied pathways. What we did hear from them in those conversations, though, is this idea of really working to help the young people develop confidence in their art form and make those deeper connections to their communities. So these teaching artists are folks who are immersed in the art form, in the discipline. So they have connections to the greater art community, and they can help young people make those connections. So they saw that through our conversations with them as a part of their role. So one teaching artist told us this, quote, "I'm a professional that not only can give them skills and the actual instruction, but also connect them to other resources or professionals who can help them along with their goal." So the teaching artist role was another thing that came up in the conversations. So as I've shared some of the themes from the structured conversations with the teaching artists, again, you can see the alignment with the characteristics of culture-centered youth arts programs that were mentioned. So related to the nurturing of artistic skills, fostering those generative connections for young people, the cultural visibility, and then highlighting those meaningful pathways that all of these were connected. And so what I want to do right now is transition us into our panel discussion. And so we have several leaders who were a part of the study, and I want to introduce you to them. So first up, we have Nari Clayton-Taylor, who is the founder and co-director of Hip Hop into Learning, based in Louisville, Kentucky. So welcome, Nari.
Hey.
Next up, we have Ofelia Guerra, who is the executive director of Ballet Folklorico de Chicago, based in Chicago, Illinois. Welcome, Ofelia.
Thank you. Hola.
Next up, we have Rafaela Fauci Macias, who is the executive director of the Youth Art Exchange, based in San Francisco, California. Welcome, Rafaela.
Hi, everyone.
And last but not least, we have Yutan Onyenjekwe, who is the drama department chair of the Newark School of the Arts, based in Newark, New Jersey. Welcome, Yutan.
Hello, everyone. Very happy to be here. Thank you.
Okay, so Nari, I want to start with you. So you've been a part of this study. You all have been a part of this study. You've seen the report. So which of the 7 culture-centered youth arts characteristics does your program embody? And how does this look in practice?
Like many of the panelists here, I could probably go on how we all touch on each of the 7, but the one that we mostly touch on is that we promote cultural visibility. You know, as an organization, we acknowledge, we affirm, and we celebrate the past, present, and the future using the art of hip hop. We start in the present, and we use our motto, lyrics to action, to help our students create music that bangs, that they want to listen to, but also connected to an issue that they may be feeling. When we think about cultural visibility, it's just, who are you and do you deserve to be seen? And we talk about this with our Brown, our Black students, and our marginalized students of the schools that we're in. When I think about some of the things that we've been able to do by using hip hop and focusing on cultural visibility, our students during the heart of Breonna Taylor wanted to, send love to Black women. And so they created a song called Crown, and then they created a Crown remix that allowed them to talk about the beauty of natural hair. With this, they were able to talk to Metro Council members here in Louisville, and they helped pass a law, the Crown Act ordinance, using hip hop. Now, this law is for natural hair, but it has helped white broadcasters. It has helped people who want to be in fire, who wanted to be firefighters, where they have used the Crown Act ordinance to support beards and to support their hair. And when I think about the future, it's because of what they've been able to do that they were invited to Berlin, Germany this summer to talk about how they are using hip hop as a catalyst for change and that they deserve to be seen. And that's how I feel that we represent and promote cultural visibility.
I love that. Thank you, Nari. Ofelia, what about you? How would you say one of the 7 characteristics show up in your program, or how does your program embody that?
Okay. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you to everybody that's been involved with creating this report. and doing all the studies. I think it's really important work and it's not to be taken lightly. So thank you to everybody. So for our program, Ballet Folklórico de Chicago, we are a nonprofit that is dedicated to preserving our Mexican dance traditions, Mexican folk dancing. So I think the one that we embody the most is being an artful sanctuary. And that is because I think, especially now in this political climate that we're in, I think it's really necessary and important for our youth to gather and to have a space where they can call it their second home and, you know, be able to, you know, get off the electronics for a while and, you know, find some common ground and learn something new, take their minds off and, you know, just, you know, get all the distractions out of their heads and just, you know, learn and express themselves in a way that they take pride not only in themselves, but in their culture. And we provide that for them. We provide a lot of opportunities for them. We employ some of them by giving them part-time jobs as assistants, and we also provide college scholarships for them. And also we give them opportunities because within the organization, we have several performing groups. So we perform for a lot of the major sports teams like the Chicago Bulls, Chicago Bears, Chicago White Sox. And that like gives them a sense of pride because they go out and they perform in front of a lot of people, and then they come back together in the studio and they're just so beaming and full of pride in what they've just done and accomplished, and it gives them a goal, it gives them motivation to continue in the program and also recruit other students. And you know, most of the growth for us has come through word of mouth. So you know, it's very flattering when our students recommend us because we provide that space for them. You know, it's a safe space. It's a space where they can grow and express themselves. So
I love that. Thank you. And Rafaela, what about you? How would you say the 7 characteristics show up in your program?
Like Nairi said, it's really hard to pick one because it feels like we are touching on many of them, and if we had lots of time, I would love to go on and on as well, just because we're so proud of our young people, our young artists. We are Youth Art Exchange, and we are a multidisciplinary arts organization here in San Francisco. We offer both performing and visual arts for free. And we're celebrating 25 years this year, so it's a big kind of benchmark for us. And the one that I wanted to highlight was fostering generative connections, which is about fostering connections in the neighborhood and community, in the larger community. We have, like I mentioned, we have many different arts disciplines that our teaching artists are teaching to our young people. We have about 7 or 8 different classes each semester. We follow kind of the school year calendar, and we think in particular that it's important to inspire young people to be civically engaged. So we work with external partners like our planning department, our city planning department here, housing developers, construction companies, the Office of Economic and Workforce Development. And our young designers engage in design build projects that mimic the real process of working as a professional artist or architect on a project that exists in the public. So things like designing and building is the key word, because they do actually build the projects. They don't just design them. So parklets, other kind of installations, public installations, murals. They've done Vision Zero, kind of bus ad campaigns. Our printmaking class has done that. Our architecture program has built benches and street furniture throughout the city. What we think is important is that they follow that process, the real world process. So they engage in community feedback. To begin with, they have design review meetings, they have a real budget, they go through the permitting process, and then they actually get to build not only the kind of the skill building through the arts of designing and using tools, but also those soft skills of building up your confidence because you're presenting your ideas, you're working on a team, you're collaborating, you're making mistakes. Maybe you had to draw something or build a model of something 72 times before you got to something that actually worked. Or maybe you drew something that was actually not able to be built because it wasn't thought through in the 3D kind of dimension. So we think that whole process is important, and it also puts youth in front of city officials and in the leadership role of making decisions about what we see in our built environment, and what they think should be represented there, in terms of their ideas and thoughts and eventually their designs. They also exhibit their work at the end of every session. So there's a public exhibit that's open to friends, families, anyone. And then we're celebrating this year 25 years of existence, but also 15 years of hosting and convening what we call the Youth Art Summit. So we invite a bunch of other partner organizations that work with youth in the arts to have a one-day exhibition and performances where we all share our resources. We all get to show, they all get to show their work off in a public exhibit. And that is something that we felt like it was a way for us to sort of share our resources as an organization, and not have to put up individual exhibitions. Like, we were able to do that, but also for youth to see like what everybody else is doing, and have that, build that confidence, again, confidence building, mattering, through exhibiting their work and talking about it and performing it. So those are some examples, I would say. And the last one would be that we have a youth advisory board that has been part of the organization from the very, very beginning. And they hire, when I say hire, I mean they interview and make decisions on any new staff and faculty that join the organization. So anyone who is a potential candidate has to go through the Youth Advisory Board and get their approval. They also write their own grants and get funded for projects that they want to work on. And so they're stipended, so they're paid. And so that's something that's really important to us and core to the work that we do.
Fantastic, thank you. Yutan, what about you? What would you say are one or several of the characteristics, CCYA characteristics, that your program embodies? And what does it look like in practice?
Sure. So I think I'd like to touch on two today. Or maybe three. We'll see how it goes. But definitely nurturing artistic skill and cultivating creative restoration. Newark School of the Arts is a multidisciplinary school as well. I'm the drama chair at the school, but we offer music, we offer visual arts, dance, and it is extracurricular, so afternoons and on the weekends. So for my youngest students, let's say ages 5 to about 7 or 8, what I have for them is a program that's called Story Makers, because one of our mantras at the school is that we're all storytellers. You can tell from my name, I'm first generation here. From my parents emigrated from Nigeria. So, very familiar with the idea of griots and us all being storytellers in our culture. So for the youngest of my students, to introduce them to theater, I have them craft their own stories. And what I'm also, with a little bit of fostering sanctuary and connection, I'm having them collaborate with each other on creating stories that they all agree on, and that they all have agency to be able to provide ideas without fear of being sort of ridiculed or shut down. It's a very open space where there are no wrong answers, and we allow the story to be shaped and grow by the students, so that by the end of our semester, the youngest students, have put on their own show with which they've written all the characters, and interspersed in it are, different basics of theater. Where's stage left? Where's stage right? What do you do with your props, et cetera, et cetera. But by the end of the semester, they've put on their own show with their own sort of plot and characters. And then speaking to nurturing artistic skill for older students, we really, really want to provide them a place that lacks or sort of does away with some of the I don't want to say like stuffiness, but like some of the sort of rigors of other like conservatory programs. We really want to give them the space to explore. Of course, I'm providing material that's rooted in the culture, rooted in things that are not unique to their own experiences, so age appropriate as well. And then through those pieces, we work on talking about how does this relate to their lives, how the choices that the characters make, what choice would you make, different ways of really sort of engaging their minds to become decision makers as artists and young actors as well. And then finally, what I'll say is, I think access to casting directors or different folks is something that I make sure to be a part of it, because we do want to, especially in Newark and in other inner city areas, we want to provide those options that are robust in other parts of the state and the nation. We want to make sure to pool our resources as much as possible to be able to provide those to our students. And in addition to those kind of connections, also sending them out into the community to perform pieces. Amiri Baraka is a Newark native, so we've had Baraka poems, Dr. King speeches, Maya Angelou, Langston Hughes. So a connection to some of the great Black writers of the past, even to Kwame Alexander, who wrote this beautiful poem called The Undefeated, that we've had them perform places. And Newark School of the Arts itself has an event called Healing Through the Arts, that is a mental health and well-being event that is open to the public. So we'll have our students perform songs and poems there as well. So really, in a very holistic way, I think I'm trying to touch on as many of these in as little time as possible, but we really do, talking about the nurturing the skill and restoration, I think, are very much primary. Having a space for students, especially going through long school days, where they can come and feel comfortable in their own skin, feel comfortable being themselves, because as an actor, you have to be. So really trying to develop that in young performers from a young age.
Excellent. Thank you, Tom. So what I want to do is invite all the panelists back on camera. You all shared some things that you have in common. There were a lot of patterns across what you all were saying. And what we want to do now, I feel like a lot of what you shared is relatable to folks who may be listening today. So want to open it up for questions. So I'm going to turn our discussion over to Siobhan to field some of the questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tiffany, and thank you to all of the panelists here. This has been an amazing discussion to hear so much of how these characteristics show up in the work that you all do. We do have some questions here for you all. The first two questions I'm going to ask directly to Tom, Esohe, and Tiffany. So first question here, were there any surprising or unexpected findings that challenged your assumptions going into the research?
I think Tom was going to take that one.
Oh, can you share your screen though, Zoe?
Oh, sure.
Thanks. Yes, the answer is yes, absolutely. And we want to talk a little bit about the ecosystems or the city ecosystems that we were in. It was, as you've heard from these amazing panelists, it was abundantly clear in this project that youth art programs that center culture provide amazing opportunities and supports for young people. We also tried to see what we could learn about how cities support CCYA. So hey, if you could just go ahead and put all of them up there. The question was, what was surprising to us? And I just want to highlight a couple of things here. We wanted to, we wanted to see how cities differed so that ultimately, beyond this project, we could think about how do you support, you know, in an ecosystem frame, how do you support a city? What do you tell folks who are thinking about things at a city level about how they support youth arts programs that center culture? So I'm not going to have time to go into all of these. Just want to highlight the third one, social and cultural histories shape CCYA programs. We saw big differences, you know, in Detroit versus Atlanta versus, you know, other different cities. But those differences weren't so much about like, you know, Detroit is the home of Motown, and so that shaped youth programs. We didn't find a lot of arts history shaping CCYA. It was more larger social cultural things like racial, like neighborhood makeup, transportation, kind of bigger non-arts cultural things that would then affect the development of arts programs. And of course, the school and the school district context affects the number and the sort of the types of CCYA programs. And then the last two there, support for teaching artists varies across communities, and how communities address program access varies across communities. So this is something we saw that's very important. I mean, we feel that through this study and through other studies we've done, we feel that teaching artists and how a city treats teaching artists determines the health of the arts ecosystem. You know, they need to be well treated. They need to be well paid and have benefits and have opportunities for advancement and all the things that we all need. And that is very different across different communities. Similarly, some programs or some cities really help parents and youth find programs, and others it's a little bit more difficult. And that's another area we saw great variation that was a little bit surprising across different cities. Anything to add, anyone?
No, I think there's a lot that we did not put in the report because there was just so much data. And so you may be like, oh, that's all, like, you know, you saw some of this in the report, but there's so much we can expound upon. And so I think that's a good kind of way to touch into it. But I think there's some really key things that may come out, you know, as we develop more publications to support people knowing more about what the programs are doing that we're looking at. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. And really quickly, I'm watching the chat here. We do have an ask from some of our participants to say if our panelists are able to change their name to include the organization that you're representing. People want to know and be able to see what organization you're representing. Thank you for that. And then we have another question here for Tom, Esohe, and Tiffany. Were there differences in how youth experienced well-being across the different art forms like visual arts, music, and dance?
It's a great question. Thank you for that. We did kind of have some interesting findings. Our study wasn't designed to compare different types of programs. We didn't kind of have that as a build into our method, but we did through the youth survey. So one of our data collection methods was to provide surveys for students who were in the programs we visited. We got forget how many, maybe over 200 surveys back from students, which is a big deal to get that many surveys back from high schoolers. But basically, we did see some differences in dance as a kind of highlight, where students who were in dance programs reported some stronger findings. They more specifically reported liking their programs more. They were more likely to report higher well-being in our survey, and they had stronger racial and ethnic identity than any other youth in the study. And so there was this interesting kind of trend that we saw in the youth survey that we could identify that students in dance programs were very much connected to what they were doing, and even more connected to the race and culture as a part of their involvement in the program. So that was a finding that I think was also unexpected in some ways, but also kind of showed maybe some thing that emerged that we could study more. So we don't know much more about that right now, besides just what we got from the surveys. But I think there's some space to really do some deeper dive into that research and maybe understand what about those dance programs made this the finding, and maybe how do we kind of explain some of the differences there. But we don't want to say that, you know, one type of art is better than another type of art for students to be involved in. They're all amazing. And then more importantly, they're all based on the interest of the student. So the student is into dance, then by all means do dance. If you want to play instruments, then I'll play instruments. I think students can benefit from all of those genres of art, but ultimately we did find some distinctions between students in dance through the surveys. I don't know how else to, you know, what else to kind of say about that at this point, but.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Now we have a question for our teaching artists that are with us today. How can organizations and institutions better support practitioners like you to do this kind of work?
I'll try to take that on. I think having been a teaching artist for many years before even being in a position where I could hire other teaching artists, one thing that always strikes me is sort of how sort of unsure any like position can be. It feels very tentative at times. I've been witness to and experienced myself, you know, sort of like you have this assignment for this minute, this however many weeks, and you know, you budget it out, you block off that time because you're going to do that, and you know, just like this is going to give this much money to me for the next few months so I can cover costs of rent or food and what have you. And then sometimes even days or day before that assignment is sort of pulled. And I think that for a lot of teaching artists, especially people who are new into the field, who are, you know, trying to find their footing, because a lot of teaching artists are also aspiring artists as well. And sort of like that uncertainty with the work that they do can negatively impact their own aspirations as artists as well. So if there's a way to better sort of like ensure like compensation at least, or you know, get a better like guarantee of like, you know, this particular assignment or this particular class is a definite go. I think that kind of communication would be very helpful.
I agree. I was also a teaching artist for many years before finding myself somehow here. And I completely agree with you. I think also we made the decision to hire all of our faculty artists as part-time staff, so they get you know, time off, paid time off, and sick time. And then also, you know, we guarantee the class like we cannot cancel it up to a certain point so that you know for sure no matter what. And we try really hard to recruit and do what it takes to make it happen. Or we find another way to replace that income with a different class or a different opportunity, because you are often an aspiring artist and you're piecing together so many different gigs just to make it work. And in a city like San Francisco, which I'm sure it's very expensive to live here, and so we're finding a lot of artists are leaving because they just can't afford it, and it doesn't make sense to commute an hour into the city to do a gig that's only paying you X amount. So also I made the decision about 2 years ago to raise all the do a research, like what artists are getting paid in our city, what is a livable wage, and to raise the hourly rate of faculty so that they can live in the city. And yes, that added a big cost to our budget, our personnel budget, but without the artists, we can't do this work, and we have to invest. We're investing so much into the youth, which is the most important thing, but we also need to invest in the artists, right? Otherwise it's gonna be an extinct, they're not gonna be able to survive. So, and then we also try to find opportunities where you can kind of stack other types of, so like if you're teaching your class, you can also do open studios, you can also do et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
This is awesome. Thank you all for those amazing answers. I will say you all our participants are sending some amazing questions. I'm checking the time here, so we'll probably only have time for about one more question. So here's a question that came from one of our participants. For youth trying to teach other youth how to express themselves freely while also battling their own environment and their circumstances, what advice would you give?
The advice that I give is that as we pour into our students, they are creating. And on Bloom's taxonomy, creating is the highest level. And so if they are creating, they can teach it. And it's about making sure that they understand that what they're creating is teachable. Many of the students that we work with, we have it instilled in our program that you have to teach the younger students how to write a rap, and like you talked about before, they also get paid for that. So that's another incentive. And it's just making sure that those students see themselves as not only artists, but as teachers, and that they understand that what they're giving back is going to help the next artist to grow up and be able to do the same thing.
Thank you so much. That was an amazing answer. I just want to extend a heartfelt thank you to all of our panelists here, to our researchers, to the team for participating, for putting this all together. Again, this was amazing for me to hear some of the findings that came from this amazing research. We have people who are just saying, hey, to our panelists, to you all, how can we get in touch with you all? How can we keep in touch? So if you all feel comfortable, feel free to share your contact information to our panelists. Drop that in the chat if you don't mind folks reaching out to you all. To all of our participants who logged on, I hope you all enjoyed this as much as I did. I was taking some notes. This was amazing. Thank you all so much for joining us this Monday afternoon, from wherever you are joining in from. And we just want to say thank you for your time, your energy, and your participation for all of us here at the Forum for Youth Investment. Thank you so much. You all have an amazing rest of your day, and we hope to see you on our next webinar. Bye.